A walk to convey power. A greeting that gets the upper hand.
I did not.
A gesture that can hide a lie. Body language can betray us. When a president's under pressure, or a celebrity's in the media glare.
We're really excited.
Look beyond the words. Their body language says it all.
It's a certain poise.
Self-touch gesture.
Hotspots.
Micro-expressions.
In this special, experts will dissect the body, the face, and the voice.
It's about our country.
To reveal its hidden meanings, its secrets. This is a world where what we say is all important.
They said this day would never come.
We hang on every word.
Tomorrow, we begin again. Thank you.
But are we getting all the message?
Bolder, darker, many psychopaths, serial killers, handwriting.
Research has shown that just 7% of human communication is through the actual words.
93% of what we communicate with others is nonverbal.
Bam, bam, bam!
93%. Think about that. 93%. So it's our tone of voice, our pitch, our posture, micro expressions on our face, and different gestures that we might use. So we put all the significance on 7% for words. We shouldn't really be doing that.
Beyond the words lies a fascinating world of nonverbal communication. The secret world of body language. We're about to watch our wannabe world leaders, our sports stars.
Good morning.
We'll revisit famous figures from recent history.
Did you kill the president? Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
We'll view our celebrities with fresh eyes. We're going to show how people in the public eye try to control the way we perceive them. And how sometimes, despite their best efforts, the truth leaks out.
Whomever it might be, if the truth is told, then my name will be cleared and I can move on with my life.
If you know what to look for.
It's not what you're seeing, it's what you're not seeing. And you're not seeing an anger response.
We're going to equip you with the tools to read those body language giveaways.
You're getting a hidden peek, a peek into the world of what's really going on there. When you can read body language, every moment you spend with others, you can make it valuable, and if you're in business, you can make it profitable. Body language is crucial.
For those who study nonverbal communication, one of the first indicators they look out for is the way someone's body moves. At this Camp David summit, President Bush is the host to visiting Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Vladimir Putin knows the world is watching him on American soil, and he also knows that his people are watching, so he must show strength.
Here, though, both leaders are making a strong body language statement.
Now here we are, two powerful world leaders in a sort of striding contest. Because, of course, the faster you stride, the more strong, powerful, and fit you are.
But it's not just the speed of walking that sends out messages.
Vladimir Putin and George Bush, both of whom are fantastically powerful men, have two completely different kinds of power, and it evidences itself through body language.
I thank you all for coming.
Vladimir Putin has what I would call a very animal power, a strongman power, and he walks by having his shoulders, they're actually bouncing back and forth, and he walks, he also makes gestures, he's very active. I would almost call it a kind of sexy power. George Bush, on the other hand, has a more traditional and I would say American power. There's very little movement above the shoulders. He's trying to look like he's controlled. There's no extra wasted energy.
I thank you all for coming.
Perceiving the body language message of these two powerful presidents is straightforward, but body language is often complex and easily misunderstood. Here, President Clinton leads Israeli and Palestinian leaders Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat out before the press during peace negotiations. It's all smiles for the cameras. But behind a facade of bonhomie, there's a power struggle going on. Clinton jokingly explains that none of them will take any questions.
We pledged to each other we would answer no questions and offer no comments. So I have to set a good example.
The body language then revealed just why that was.
Oh, my.
Wow.
Wow. Almost a physical fight.
Many viewed this apparently light-hearted tussle as a sign that Arafat and Barak were getting on well. Think again.
There is a great meaning behind who goes through the door first. Now, of course, here in the West, letting someone through the door first doesn't really matter. It's polite, maybe. But in the Middle East, it has significant cultural impact.
The host, the power person, says, I'm in control. I'll help you through the door. I'll show you the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Throw in the fear and tension present in most Middle East negotiations, and suddenly the desire of both Arafat and Barak not to go through that door before the other starts to make sense.
This is a classic example, in an extreme way, of how the last man through the door is the winner. So Barak reaches for Yasser Arafat. Arafat literally grabs his arm, moves around, and starts waggling his finger at Barak, Barak then uses as an opportunity, like a wrestling match, to move round to actually be behind Arafat, and then literally grabs Arafat, who holds him by the arm, and shoves him through the door bodily.
So you've got fear and power struggle showing in big, bold body language movements.
Arafat and Barak are not the only ones to appreciate the significance of the last man through the door move. Even when friends and allies meet, subtle cues reveal who's top dog. 2003, British Prime Minister Tony Blair plays host to President Bush.
In this particular example, we're looking at number 10 Downing Street, and one would expect Tony Blair to be very territorial. It's his territory, he should be host, he should be in charge and the boss in terms of who at least goes through the door.
And yet, Tony Blair, the Prime Minister, accepts that the seniority in place here is the President. So President Bush says, photo op's over, gives them the little nod. And so they start going in.
The President's in charge of the choreography.
He goes through the door last, he uses his left hand, and taps Blair forward, not shoving Blair through the door, but helping him through the door, meaning Bush is in charge.
As they go in, the President, being in charge and wanting to be clear that he's in charge, not only displays the ownership symbol of putting his hand on Tony Blair's back, but then he displays a further bit of dominance.
Gives him 3 little taps just to let him know that actually he's a good little boy and that George W. Bush is boss.
A pat on the back is one way to demonstrate power. Getting the upper hand is another, quite literally. When body language savvy world leaders get together, they know there's one surefire moment to demonstrate dominance: the handshake photo op.
If you're looking at the left of the picture, they always want to be standing on the left of the picture. Let me demonstrate. If I'm shaking hands here, what's going to happen? I'm at the bottom of the handshake. My palm is facing up. That's a very vulnerable position. If I'm shaking hands here, and I've got my arm around the person, I'm shaking hands, who's got the upper hand? I've got the upper hand. If someone's coming in to shake your hand like this, here's the nice solid handshake. It should be straight and firm. If it's not...
Janine Driver teaches body language evening classes.
It's kind of hard to dominate. You're a powerful force.
She believes the visual impact of important handshakes was first appreciated in 1970, when Elvis Presley famously paid a visit to President Nixon at the White House.
We see a picture of Nixon, and he's shaking hands with Elvis Presley. Nixon's got the upper hand. That's where the expression comes from. I've got the upper hand here. So now that people know about this in politics, you see them jockeying for position when it comes time to take the picture.
At this summit in 2006, hosted by Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader was on full handshake alert.
He strategically placed himself in a position where when they're coming forward, he's going to get the dominant position. They're coming out of cars this way, they're coming up to him, the cameras are here. Every single picture, who gets the upper hand? Putin.
Then, up strides Tony Blair.
We see that Tony Blair is going to actually grab onto Vladimir Putin's hands, this classic thing of grabbing somebody by the elbow to show who is actually the leader.
Score 1 for Blair. Next, it's President Bush's turn.
George Bush, on the other hand, then comes in and realizes he's on the wrong side of the photo.
Morning.
So when he reaches in to grab, he immediately crowds Putin. So instead of just grabbing and letting Putin grab his arm, George Bush puts his shoulder against Putin so that Putin's left arm is in no way in a position to grab hold of Bush's right arm. Then as soon as Bush turns out, he immediately goes for a little tap, a steer on Putin's back to actually give him a push. And Putin, making sure not to be outdone, puts his right arm out and gives Bush a little tap as well.
We'll call that a draw. Even seated, the bodies of world leaders can speak volumes. Here's a masterclass from FDR.
With President Roosevelt presiding, the historic conference began.
February 1945. Franklin D. Roosevelt, Joseph Stalin, and Winston Churchill famously meet at the Yalta Conference.
The Big Three, surrounded by the chiefs of staff, with their staffs and civilian officials, posed for the cameras in the patio of Lavatia Palace.
The Allies had worked together for 3 years, but now, with the end of the war in sight, Roosevelt knew all that was set to change.
We see three powerful men all wanting to dominate. Visually, Roosevelt's in the center, and the center figure always appears to us to be the most important.
And even when he's talking to Stalin, he turns the other way and Stalin leans in. Stalin is actually, if you like, following Roosevelt. Roosevelt is the real leader of the two.
Meanwhile, Churchill's body language is conveying Britain's diminishing status.
It doesn't look as though Churchill is a full and equal participant. Not only is his posture hunched up, but Roosevelt barely ever talks to him, and Stalin doesn't really meet him except to shake his hand.
Churchill has both elbows out, but the tell is that he's holding his hat in his lap to cover up his private parts, which feel kind of vulnerable in this situation.
You can see how each of these men, each, if you like, a master in their own country, how they interact with one another and what their relationship is in the world stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
A politician's body language can easily give him away, especially when he's under pressure.
Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome this opportunity tonight to meet with the managing editors of the nation's newspapers.
It's the night of November 13th, 1973. Watergate is at its height. President Nixon holds a live televised question and answer session with the nation's newspaper editors.
And 8 years of $45,000.
His body language says it all. Nixon knew it was not going to be an easy evening.
Mr. Quinn.
Mr. President, this morning Governor Askew of Florida addressed this group.
Stop. Right there, we see Nixon standing with his hands behind his back, which gives the indication that he has nothing to hide. He's got this open front. However, he's holding his wrist like this behind his back, and he's touching himself like this. It's called a self-touch gesture. He's basically saying, okay, here we go. I can get through this.
His words are combative, but his body language betrays anxiety.
As far as this money is concerned, how is it possible for you to have this kind of investment when all you earned was $800,000 as president? Well, I should point out, I wasn't a pauper when I became president. I wasn't very rich, as presidents go.
You can see in his body as he's trying to defend himself against essentially the press corps that is acting like a pack of wolves. He's holding himself away from the podium like he's going to be attacked from it.
In this case, Nixon is trying to protect himself from some searching questions.
That I welcome this kind of examination because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
He says, I'm not a crook, and immediately goes into retreat. His body backs away. Really clear tell. When somebody makes a statement, a definitive statement, and immediately retreats, we know they don't think they told the truth. They know they didn't tell the truth. They're escaping that lie.
Nixon also suddenly crosses his arms.
He goes immediately from that, quick arm cross, to protect himself. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I just said something, I just said something.
And also, to the best of my ability.
Right there, shaking his head no.
Time and again throughout this exchange,
Bam, right away.
Nixon displays tellingly defensive body language.
Stop, look at this.
Everyone's body language is different. Each person has his own quirks. To unlock the secrets of body language, the experts rely on an analytical process they call norming.
When it comes to deciphering body language, norming is crucial.
Reading body language, you're looking for what's normal for that situation, and you're looking for what's normal for that particular person.
Using the 24/7 coverage of politicians and celebrities, the experts construct a template of what's normal for that person.
See what they do when they're under no pressure. See what the person in front of you is doing when you're asking them regular questions about life. Then you have a norm.
But even without the chance to get this norm, experts can still read someone's body language with accuracy.
If you don't know what's normal for that person, you go back to the context again and say, okay, what would be normal in that situation? So if I am asked to look at a suspect in a crime, I'm thinking, what would be a normal response for a husband whose wife is missing? What would be a normal response for parents if their children are missing? And how far from normal is this behavior?
When someone's body language departs from the norm, it can often be a sign that all is not well. Britney Spears makes a perfect body language case study because of her love-hate relationship with living in the public eye. Spears was in the hate mode here.
In terms of how we protect ourselves when we're in trouble, the first thing you have to do, of course, especially if you're a celebrity, is you've got to cover your eyes. If people can see your eyes, they can see your soul. So she puts on dark glasses, whether it's night or day, irrelevant. The dark glasses go on.
These signs of distress are in marked contrast to the Britney of earlier times.
Everything was spontaneous and relaxed and look at me.
Britney looks awesome.
Chicken wings.
Now she's messed up, and the body language shows that lack of control over herself.
Her body language is very defensive, whereas it used to be very welcoming. She's closing down and looking panicky, whereas she used to be absolutely adoring the limelight.
Under this kind of intense scrutiny, a celebrity's body language needs a helping hand.
We can only guess at the sort of coaching or advice that someone in her position is getting, but I'm sure she's being advised all the time.
She's not alone. Take Paris Hilton. She rarely has a night in. So how would she behave on a night out of jail? When Paris Hilton is released from jail, as she emerges into the night, she knows the world is watching.
She knows, or at least has been told, that she's got to demonstrate that she's learnt her lesson. After all, she's actually been to jail. So she can't come out and be her normal playful self and jump on a table and start lap dancing, because this moment doesn't warrant such behavior.
Her body language has been carefully planned in advance.
And as she walks along, she straightens herself a little bit because she knows she's on.
She does a very unusual gesture.
Little kind of prim pose where she gets her hands, she crosses her fingers and she holds them in front of herself like a very good girl.
I've never seen her do that gesture in any other situation.
In the same way some people arrive fashionably late, she's leaving prison fashionably punished.
Paris Hilton's calculated little girl performance was her way of dealing with the inevitable media frenzy surrounding her release from jail. Politicians, like celebrities, are always in the media spotlight. But one world leader has a unique way of using body language to slide through any situation, however embarrassing. George W. Bush.
The thing about Bush, no matter if he says something wrong or he does some silly mistake, what happens with him is he gets like a kid. He becomes this little 6-year-old kid like, I made a mistake. He gets this little shoulder shrug, and he will even look you right in the eye and say, hey, I tried to get out this door, it didn't work.
I was trying to escape. It didn't work.
It's likable.
Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
It's this playful, likable trait that if you saw your 5-year-old kid, you'd want to pinch his little cheeks. But it's the President of the United States.
President Bush's body language reveals his resilience to his own mistakes.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
A beautiful example of George W. Bush getting completely lost in the middle of what he's saying.
Fool me once.
He pauses a long time.
Shame on.
He knows that the next word is shame on you.
Shame on you.
But he knows also that he's completely lost the next sentence. He has no idea where he's going. And what you'll see with his head is, fool me once, and he bends down like this, like they're about to throw tomatoes at him or something, really rotten stuff.
If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Fool me once, shame on you, and then he just comes up and he misquotes The Who, won't get fooled again.
If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
There's this long pause where he's evaluating if he's made a complete fool of himself.
And then he carries on regardless.
We've got to understand the nature of the regime we're dealing with.
Body language matters. If you want to be President of the United States, it's vital.
The facts are that he has said in the last week that he really liked the ideas of the Republicans over the last 10 to 15 years.
Politicians like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama know that words are only part of their message. Voters are also influenced by the image they portray. So when did it dawn on politicians that body language was so powerful? It's 1960. Vice President Richard Nixon and Senator John F. Kennedy campaigned for the presidency. This election will be a turning point in the relationship between politicians and body language.
It really wasn't until what's labeled the Great Debate, which is the debate between Nixon and Kennedy, the first televised debate, that candidates began to realize they had to focus on their nonverbal visual image.
Smith, Senator Kennedy, the things that Senator Kennedy has said, many of us can agree with.
The candidates square up to each other in front of a television audience of 70 million people. Nixon looks far less assured in front of the cameras than Kennedy.
Federal control. Mr. Nixon, would you like to comment on that statement? I have no comment. Thank you, Mr. Nixon. That completes the opening statement.
Nixon had only just come out of the hospital after receiving treatment for an injured knee, and then refused makeup when he got to the TV studio.
He was a manly man. He didn't want makeup. Kennedy said, put the makeup on, put all that makeup on, and he was already attractive.
Nixon sweated under the lights. He compared unfavorably with the tanned and fit-looking Kennedy.
In the polls after that debate, Nixon, to the radio audience that only heard him, won by a landslide. But the poll of the audience that saw the debate, Kennedy won by a landslide. So all of a sudden, politicians realized they had to be aware of their visual image.
Nearly 50 years later, today's presidential hopefuls receive saturation media coverage. Voters observe their every move. Under such scrutiny, managing their image is a job for the professionals.
The whole thing is a game of image versus objectives. Your objective is to win the vote.
Body language is, of course, an important part of that image, which is why many politicians employ coaches, like Mark Jeffries.
Very often when working with a politician, when working with someone who's trying to shape an image, you will ask that politician, so who do you admire in the public eye? And if it's a man, I mean, at the moment, typically it'd be someone like George Clooney, say. Because here's someone who embodies style and charm and charisma, and yet isn't extremely young and isn't extremely old, so he's kind of an ideal model.
The very training actors like Clooney undergo usually leads to good body language in public.
That puts them way ahead of politicians, who have to be taught how to walk, where to look, how to smile even.
So is it possible to detect signs of body language coaching in a politician?
This is Hillary Clinton. I want to thank you for letting me speak with you about an issue that is central
Here's Hillary
to our
Clinton
children's future,
back in 1993.
to restore this nation's economy.
The overall body language here is soft, soft, feminine, soft, soft. I'm not the president. I'm the president's wife.
Back then, Hillary's body language was very understated.
Stand up, you silly woman. Oh, all right. Okay. So she comes in and she's a little hunched over, because that's what you do when you feel slightly threatened. Because when you don't feel threatened, when you feel very confident, you stand up very straight. You thrust your chest out.
Fast forward 15 years, through Hillary's journey from First Lady to U.S. Senator to candidate for the Democratic nomination for president. How much has her body language changed?
It's so interesting and so dramatic of a change from earlier Hillary to, I call Hillary Light. There's been this transformation of her body language, how she's approaching people.
Now together,